Hello, everyone. Welcome to ChooseCyber, where we discuss different cybersecurity roles to close the cybersecurity career knowledge gap. My name is Christina Mortimer, and today we'll be talking to our risk management specialist, Kristen Trobnis. So, Kristen, tell me a little bit about yourself. What is your educational background, and who exactly is a risk manager?
Well, thank you very much, Christina, and I am thrilled to be here. So I started in risk management many years ago, actually out of one, thinking I wanted to go into it, but two, out of just sheer mistake. I was working at Fidelity Investments, and I was working within a financial services area, and they had a working group that focused on business continuity. And I'm talking about this because this is really the one time I started to learn about risk management. This was well before 9/11, where business continuity and even information security really started to become hot. And at that point in time, I found that I would really like to drive more of a career or focus in that area. And then I eventually had, a couple of years later, an opportunity to become a business continuity planner for one of Fidelity's trading floors. And part of that role was also being their business information security officer and building access controls. And so that was the first time I really started to enjoy risk management and learning more about the field.
Okay, awesome. That kind of covers my next question that I was going to ask you, that how do you become interested in cybersecurity risk management, or how did you even figure out it was the right fit for you?
Sure. So I know, I just talked a little bit about it, but at first, I loved it. There's a lot, as everyone knows, there's a lot to do in this space. And even back before 2001, there was a lot to do in this space. It was really the infancy of information security, not as much as business continuity, because it's always dealt with, natural disasters, but making sure that we had the right controls in our environments, right access controls, and particularly understanding our data. And that really fascinated me. Yes, I went to school at Northeastern University for my undergrad was finance and my master's was leadership. But I knew I did not want to go into accounting or into more of the finance space. I really enjoyed more of the customer service interaction with others, but also more of, and I do have an analytical mind, but not as much with numbers as with data. And that's really what drove me, to the field further and further.
So the next question, I think it's the most important question that I'm going to ask here today that will help people understand exactly what it is that you actually do. What does your day-to-day look like? What types of meetings do you attend? What are your daily tasks, applications you use, people you interact with, and so on?
Sure. So my day-to-day in the role that I have today with Capital One is definitely much different than my previous roles I have. Today, I'm an individual contributor. I am building, or at least helping build, a governance framework. I took a back step on my career. One, I wanted to pivot more to learn more in depth about cloud and developing software products in the cloud. As well as bring my risk and information security, privacy knowledge to a product, but also to bridge the gap between all my banking and banking and broker-dealer and insurance regulatory experience. I wanted to bring it into more of the software space and be able to cross that gap so that those folks that are in the banking side that are in risk and in audit and compliance, bring that knowledge that I have to them, that surely the product that we are building, the software product that we're building, doesn't conflict with the banking regs of Capital One in particular. And that, we're not trying to build something that's going to cause any reputational risks or anything like that. My previous roles were more in a focused area that was heading up risk or heading up privacy or any of the groups, and really building out not just the teams, but also building from scratch processes and controls and risks, and really getting involved in understanding how did the organization build these things. One, some of the organizations, I can tell you, did not have any documentation in place. And so as you start to evolve as an organization, you want to build more product or you want to expand from a strategic perspective, not knowing what your processes look like or understanding your controls is very difficult to continue on or even be strategic, because as you build this new thing and it gets into the environment, it then clashes with what's there because you don't know enough about what you have. And so my main focus as a risk officer or privacy officer is to make sure those right controls are there. And then I can be proactive with the business to say, okay, here's the processes that your new strategic initiative is going to hit up against. And here's where your potential risks are. On the other side, if you want to build X into your strategic initiative, it will then help bring forward that strategic initiative in a much positive way and potentially a lot less risk.
So a lot of collaboration with other teams and clients. Yeah.
Correct. Absolutely.
So what are some of the things that you love about your job, and what is something that sometimes frustrates you, or what do you find most challenging about being a risk manager?
So what I love about my job is it's always changing. There's something new every single day, and I learn from it. There's always a great amount of learning opportunity. You will never be bored. As we look at, I've been in the field for over 20 years. There's so many things that have evolved from a regulatory perspective, from an event perspective. You think about now where we are from a cyber perspective. And not only that, but the organizations evolve with it. So there's opportunity in that sense. Plus there's opportunity to move around. I can tell you I've been extremely fortunate on the job front because there's been so many different opportunities that I could move to or move around to if by chance I got bored and the past positions, as well as, building all this, you can really see positive change with organizations as they have more of a uniform, structured, and honestly flexible risk environment, because that also helps them grow. And you can see that all start to work together. For more of a negative side, I would just say that there are so many organizations today that don't value risk, especially, more from a risk management versus information security per se. And I would just say that is probably one of the most difficult things, because risk teams themselves tend to get undervalued. And if you're not able, as in some of my positions as a senior person, show the value of what you're doing, or at least be able to have that conversation with the executives about what you're doing, a lot of times they're overlooked. And so you may not be part of a strategic project, or you may not be part of a strategic, vendor relationship. And what ends up happening is, because they don't include you, or they don't see the value of you of being at that table, that tends to be potentially a negative impact on the company, but then on your team as well, because you're always what I would call backpedaling. You're always trying to keep up. And I wouldn't say that happens to all organizations, but at least several that I've worked for, I have not seen the proper, what I would call tone at the top or risk culture that should be going on from the executive level. And it comes down to, quite honestly, that they don't understand it. No matter how much you drive home, or you can draw up all the pretty, presentations and everything else, they just don't understand, what risk is. And so I take this, right, as more of, okay, how can I help them understand, engage in that type of thing? And I will then, and this is a thing this is a path I would recommend for many that are looking at this field, is that just know there's lots of change, but also you can add to change too. So how can you add value, or how can you manage up that whole risk culture so that you can change those viewpoints, those opinions, and then become more involved? And there's a lot of ways to do that, from a communication path, from more of data. Data is a massive commodity when it comes to risk management. And so using that as the forefront to change that risk culture is extremely positive.
Yeah, I was going to say that exactly like emphasizes too that there's still so much to learn about cybersecurity, and that is also what interests me about cybersecurity. There's such a big variety of different things that you can do and different things that you can learn about, so it's always fascinating. In addition to being a risk manager, you're also a professor teaching about cybersecurity. Could you tell me about a memorable topic that you're passionate about teaching, or a project that you worked on as a risk manager?
So absolutely, and it is my passion. I love teaching. I've been doing it for 12 years, all at Northeastern. Since I love Northeastern, I think it has a phenomenal program, and they do have phenomenal information security, cybersecurity program. In fact, I even have a certificate in computer crime and security way back when, because when I got into more of the cybersecurity space and more looking at risk in cybersecurity, I really wanted to learn more about it. And so that has led me to today, where I'm not teaching directly on cybersecurity or governance, but I do teach within the project management program. It's a master's level program, and I'm also teaching in the master's of data analytics, and I teach in risk. So both sides, I'm teaching risk classes. It's important to know, when you're there and you're learning that the rapid change of technology is taking place. And so when you're facing that from a cybersecurity professional, you need to understand, okay, if we're going to build something, we can't just plan, especially from a project perspective, years out or even 12 months out. We have to have these sprints, as they call them, where they're short and sweet, because otherwise you will not keep up. And so that's from the project side. When you think about the data side or the data analytics side, there's so much data that is available today. But the caveat now is that it's so much different than, say, 10 years ago as you're looking at data analytics, because we didn't have the influence of what I would call fake data in our environments, or disruptive groups, right? So hackers and other things. And I do feel, kind of connecting back to my risk management space, I do feel that this is stuff that companies should be planning for from a risk management perspective, but they never did until now, right? They're looking at all this now, but now all this data that's gone on for years is in your environment. And so as a cybersecurity expert, how do you ensure, one, your network, your architecture is set properly, but then when you're getting all this data in or around, how do you ensure that that data is truly real, and that as the company is processing for their financials or quarterly reports, how do they ensure that that's actually valid data that they should be using for data analytics? And so I think all of this is tying in nicely with cyber. I will say, one of the things that, I talked today in my classes is about the whole fourth industrial revolution, or fourth revolution, with artificial intelligence and bots and everything else. We've been in the cyberspace, say, since, 2000. And we've ramped up the last 10 years around cybersecurity, and even more now with all the hacking going on. But now what, right? Now we have to pivot because of the fact that technology is moving so fast. And now we're moving into the artificial world. And now with artificial intelligence baked into our environments, what does that mean? What is that going to drive for information security or cybersecurity? Because that is definitely something that I'm trying to pay attention to and learn more about. But in some ways, there's so many of us that don't understand it and don't realize the speed or what's changing.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing that, we're kind of taken aback. We've always been in this position as, especially from a US governmental perspective, is we've always been behind. And so companies really need to adjust and say, okay, we're adding all this artificial intelligence to our environments. What does that mean? And how do we ensure we stay focused on that cyber front to protect not only our environments, but our data?
Yeah, no, that's definitely something interesting to think about, like the impact that it has in our society even as well. So
Correct.
what advice would you give someone who's interested in stepping into the cybersecurity risk management field, whether it's someone who's just starting out in cybersecurity or has been in cybersecurity for years and is just looking to change their career path?
My advice would be is go for it. Whether you're coming out of high school or you're in high school. If you have an interest in coding, you have an interest in data, or you just love change, it's a good field to get into. I can tell you just by my own experience, and we can see it around in our organizations. The fact is there's not enough people to fill the roles in the cyber information security risk space anymore. And so, if that's what you're interested in, I would continue to pursue. First off, start to learn the basics, right? Learn the basics of how do organizations operate? How is, a network established, and not just, and I think there's different levels. There's companies today that are still on, work with data centers and hardware and servers, that type of thing. And then they have maybe 20 or 30% of their business in the cloud. So what does that all mean, right? So before going into an organization, if you can get that necessary learning in college, or even, when you're in a senior in high school, how architectures work, and then how does data flow, right? Data management in particular. You will be so much further ahead as you start to look at these roles. I've seen all different career paths, right? Or more really not career paths, but educational paths, from people that are going in the finance path. You still have analytical perspective there. And so I tell students or folks that are interested in this, if you like the finance side, go into the forensics path, right? Follow the forensic accounting path, because that would connect you into cyber if you wanted to. If you're obviously in computer science, that's going to take you in there, or engineering, that could take you in there. If you're in the data management side, that can take you in there. Law enforcement right now is so desperate for people that have the cyber background, because you think about where crime is going, and a lot of it is taking place on their mobile phones, and that's a device.
Yeah.
So there's so many career paths that you can follow to get into cybersecurity or risk. And like I said, just know that it's always evolving and always change. I can also say more for risk management, really drive home your value. And that stems from, what's the cost benefit of risk and managing risk. That is one thing. When you're in organizations, you'll find risk management is considered a cost center, whereas cybersecurity is still a cost center. But the day they stop a hack, or stop an infiltration, right away you're going all the way to the top. And honestly, cyber doesn't have as much need to show their reputation or show their value, given kind of the environment we live in. But risk does. Risk has always had that connotation. They're a cost center. They're not making money for the firm. But I can tell you there's definitely ways of showing that. And as once you can show your value, you're golden in that space. I'll add here too, my whole career has been just learning and growing, and I move around. I don't stay in a position too long, maybe 3 to 4 years. But I also will say is you need to understand the basics of the organization that you're working for. Even if you get into an operational position or a customer service position or business analysis, or system analysis position or even project management, know that you can move. You can move into these roles pretty easily. And not only that, you're taking all that knowledge you have from what the company, how the company operates, and going to those fields. And that's what's also needed. We tend to forget that we come out of college with these degrees and we just want to get right into the position. But you don't learn the company. And so a lot of times being in a customer service front, you get to learn the company, you get to learn how the systems operate. And that is also extremely beneficial.
And lastly, for someone that is currently a risk manager, where do you see yourself in 3 to 5 years? What are your next goals? What else are you looking to accomplish?
So in the next 3 to 5 years, again, I'm going to continue teaching and growing my skills there. As I mentioned, I'm in a more lower level position, but that was my choice because I wanted to learn about cloud computing and honestly cloud development and that type of thing. And I'm learning that. My hope would be is that I will basically work myself back up into more of a risk-focused role, focusing in with the cloud and what the cloud has to offer. Very much aligned in the sense of how do we protect our organizations with artificial intelligence, but at the same time, understanding how those operate. And so looking at a role that's going to combine, and quite frankly, what would be the best thing for me is to combine all my knowledge of financial services, at the same time, my knowledge of risk and processes and controls, and then layer on all this new technology that's coming out, so that I can then bring a true value proposition to organizations and ensure that people looking at risk from all different angles, not only from a control angle, but how are we processing our data? And is our data disruptive too in the organization? That's my hope. I'm not looking to be, the top rock star anywhere, but certainly would love to be in a senior position again in the near future, but more in the technology space, either in financial services or out. And then obviously I'll continue teaching too.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, Kristen. Thank you so much for doing this. I definitely gained a lot of value out of this, and I hope my audience will as well. Anyone who's watching this, make sure to subscribe so you wouldn't miss out on the next video. Thank you again, Kristen.
Thank you. Take care.